Welcome everybody to Talking Niagara on Thursday, July 11th, isn't it? I, I forgot it was the 10th. Okay, so before we go anything else about today's topic, you've got an update in relation to the water and wastewater stuff at the Stanley Business Park.
Yeah, the city as of Monday has been involved with the MECP to trace the where the oil's coming from. But it's an unfortunate situation because the first complaint was made last Tuesday. So for the city to start getting involved now is a little late, but it's better late than never. The MECP seems to have a problem. I think they're closed on weekends.
Yeah. Well, what government organization isn't in the English-speaking world?
Yeah, but we're talking about a place that's in charge of hazardous spills. And
Yeah.
hazardous spills don't recognize if it's a weekend. Hazardous spills don't recognize properties.
Hey,
It's
you
it's
got me. You got me, Mike.
it's a frightening situation.
You won't find any complaints here. You know what I mean?
Well, see, the auditor general about a year and a half ago had stated the MECP is not capable of doing their job, and in about a year, everything's come to
Well,
light that she said.
yeah. And here's the thing, and I'm not making any accusations about our people down in about anybody in in the Don Murray Business Park, but if you were uh, a a nasty, vicious, snide capitalist who didn't care a toss about the environment, essentially you bottle up all your stuff during the during the week, and then open the valve on Friday night at 8 o'clock to
It's
allow it
quite
to all trickle
possible.
out.
It's quite possible that's what's happening. I always like to give the benefit of the doubt and say that it's an
I know.
accident until proven different, but
Yep.
it's definitely the second time in a year that pipe has been used to release something into the Welland River without monitoring on a daily basis. So
Well,
it's kind of
that actually,
telling you that they are using it as a dump whenever they please.
yeah, that actually gets me to ask the question: why isn't in places like industrial parks? Why isn't the water monitored?
Well, we're going to open up that question because they want to put housing here now, right?
Yeah.
They want to put high dense housing on on the Welland River, and here we have the industrial section of Niagara Falls. It just shows you why you shouldn't put high density housing near industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I'm not. Well, the question of housing near industry, it's like that's actually often been an issue, hasn't it? Because if you look at if you wind the clock back to kind of just after the Second World War, there were some kind of idealistic plans built about what the perfect city would look like, and how the industrial areas would essentially be, since the thing was like Europe, northern hemisphere based, where it would be where the winds would blow away the industrial pollutants away from the city. So essentially, like the northeast of every city would be where all the industries would be.
Yeah.
Right, and therefore everybody who lived in that city would live to the south and to the west of it, and therefore wouldn't be impacted by the prevailing winds that would tend to blow away the industrial waste, right? And besides which, hey, there's agriculture between here and the next city.
Correct. And it used to be called a smart growth program. They introduced it not too long ago, and that got crushed really quick, really quick. It was the first good idea I ever heard come from government in a long time, and it doesn't even exist anymore. You don't hear any government talking about smart growth programs anymore. Although the Trudeau
Well,
government, the Trudeau government is trying to do that housing project to make it so that it's along all the travel route lines and everything. and
Yeah.
and that's the great idea. I just, the Ford government seems to be forging ahead with a different idea.
Yeah. Well, our today's subject, ironically, is about transit, right?
Yeah.
So, Niagara Transit, Niagara has a regional transit system that's the result of of the amalgamation of the 12 municipalities' individual transit options, if they existed, and the region combining them to make an existing, a new transit system. But one of the things I was looking at here, and I'm asking the question, is that enough? Angela was talking yesterday about the need for additional transit for disabled. I'm also looking at my first search that I did yesterday was, is there a transit plan for the Niagara region? Would you like to answer? Would you like to hazard a guess as to what I found?
I would say no.
None whatsoever that I can see. And hey, I've got a website that is called Niagara Transit Commission. And do I see anywhere on this website a link to somewhere that says Niagara's future transit plan? Because obviously what we have now is not what we're building, what we need to build it for the future. There's a thing on here which is buses, roads, maps, and trails. That's what we have today. Business and development. Well, that's not development of the transit. That's about business, right? Careers and job opportunities, childcare assistance, garbage recycling, government and council, health and safety, etc., etc. So they talk about the history of it, some reports on that, but there's not a plan for the future. No 5-year plan, no 10-year plan.
Yeah, that's frightening. And a failure, right? It's a failure right away. What are they doing? They're going to build the houses first and worry about transit later.
Well, actually, and that's a big problem because, we've got the, it's like I couldn't travel from, well, if I were to travel from my house to your house by bus, it would probably take me an hour and a half. And I'd probably walk about 3 or 4 miles in the meanwhile. I haven't a clue as to what the bus routes are, by the way. I could probably walk it quicker.
There are situations where you can walk faster than the bus route would get you there. That's for sure. You got to, because you got to transfer from one bus to another to get to a certain area or whatnot. It would take longer sometimes to take the bus than it would to walk. But if you're disabled, what choice do you have?
Yeah. And for example, if I worked in that call center out on Montrose, the one south of Niagara Square.
Yeah.
And I miss my bus. I'm probably going to miss, my best option to get to work is go by taxi.
Yeah. Imagine what the cost of that would be.
If I didn't have a car,
It would be a $30 ride there.
That's at least a $35 ride. But you got to factor in the fact that I could get fired from my job if I didn't get there on time, right?
Yes. The transit system once an hour is a killer, really. Like you said, if you miss the bus, you're done. And we have a city that's set up in a grid pattern, like more rectangular grid pattern than most cities, which should make it easier.
St. Catharines, for example, is a diamond pattern grid, isn't it?
Yeah, St. Catharines is one of the worst set up cities I've ever seen for traffic. It's just horrible. But Niagara Falls, we have a grid pattern that's pretty easy to make routes, and you can make your routes. You can make your routes a lot better where the buses could come every half hour instead of an hour by just doing a circle around Dorchester to Drummond back to the hub, right? So they should come up with a different way.
Well, you see, one of the things that gets me is like, why isn't there a bus that goes from the north end of Stanley, somewhere on the north end of Stanley, out by Whirlpool, out in the Whirlpool area, that goes all the way down Stanley, through the tourist district to, let's say, Don Murray.
Right.
And circles back around from Don Murray and comes back up to the north end, some wherever the two things are. Why isn't there a similar one that goes from, let's say, Fireman's Park down Dorchester all the way to to McLeod and Dorchester, that type area?
Right.
Right.
You could do the patterns that way because of our rectangular setup, right?
Yeah. And again, you could run a bus that goes from the old transit hub down at Erie and Queen, that goes up bridge, up Thorold Stone, and goes out to the end of the city and goes that way. You could run another bus that went from the downtown hub through up to, let's say, zigzagging its way up to Lundy's Lane and following all the way up there on the Lundy's traffic and that type of thing, or you can run one from McLeod out in the sticks wherever to Marineland.
Yeah, if you went vertical and horizontal, then you could figure out a way to catch the bus either way and have faster ways to get where.
Yeah, and then you can run some buses that zigzag.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like for example, it would be valid to run a bus service, in my mind, from here to Niagara Square.
Yes.
Or from downtown to Niagara Square is what I meant. Downtown Niagara to Niagara Square.
See, so our city's set up perfect that way. And fortunately, you got Welland, who's got like two cities because it's separated by the canal. You got St. Catharines, that's like two cities that's separated by the highway. I don't know how you'd set up those patterns, but
they actually have more sensible buses. St. Catharines has more sensible buses. I don't know the routes, but and like I don't so sure of the routes here in the Falls, except I know they go round in circles, which drives everybody batty.
Yeah,
and that's a part of the problem about not having a plan. And there are many, of the 12 municipalities that join together to form Niagara Regional Transit. Of course, many of them, like Wellandport, had nothing.
Yeah.
Right. So they're going, even if we get one bus that's paid for by the region, where we've got a victory here.
Yeah, that would be a big win. If you have no public transportation at all, just to get one would be a big win.
Yeah. And if they get one bus that takes them from Wellandport to Port Coburn, hey, they're golden, right?
Yeah. But it's sad. It's sad that smaller areas are left behind because of it's like a farmland situation, right? Where you have vast land but not a lot of people. So it's a harder thing to figure out for transit, right?
Yeah. And you see, the thing that bothers me about all of this transit is, I don't know whether you and I have had the discussion, but keeping the money, keeping the purse strings tight is an important aspect, right? I'm not saying, and this is where a plan comes into place. And I'm not saying that we go and triple the amount of buses that we've got and bus routes that we've got overnight. That's not going to happen. Let's be very clear about that.
I don't think you need to.
You don't. Largely you don't, but what you do need to do is understand what people's options are, what people need out of transit, i.e. do we need to run a bus route that comes from Welland to Niagara Falls at 5 o'clock in the morning in order to serve those people who live in Welland, who work at the who work in the tourist zone?
Yeah. Well, you got to start looking into things like that and see if the even the people that have the employees there would the private sector maybe start pitching in for the transit too, so that their employees get in there.
And that's another question. Okay, that's actually raises a big one.
I'm going to be right back in 1 minute.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I'll hold off on this big one. Well, we're just waiting here because Mike's had a little bit of an emergency, but we'll be back with Mike shortly. And if we were now on commercial TV, you'd be seeing an ad for, an ad for butter or Coca-Cola or something like that. But we're not doing that, So there we are. Okay, so ad over. Welcome back, Mike. Okay, so I was going to say to you, hey, talking about private money. The London Underground system, when it was first built I think it's about either the late 1870s or early 1880s. It was entirely 100% built with private money. A private consortium built what was called the Metropolitan Line, right? Which was two of the lines that exist today. One is the Circle Line, and the other is the Metropolitan Line, or the downtown versions of the Metropolitan Line, right? And essentially, there was almost $1 trillion in today's money put in by private industry to build that service. Clearly, I'm not saying that Niagara needs $1 trillion put in by private industry, but I'm just saying that is something to think about. And that is why London Underground exists today, because of that infrastructure that was privately put in back in the late 1800s.
Well, it could only benefit them if it provides a ride for workers to get to their workplace.
That's exactly what it did, because of course it meant that where even in a city the size of London, it meant before that if you were recruiting people, you could only recruit people essentially that were on the bus, that lived within the couple of mile walking distance, or were on the bus routes to your factory or to your office space or to your work site, whatever the thing was. So that would be the limitation. Now, when you added the Circle Line in, now you can get people from the other side of London who want a job, who are coming across the city as well.
Yes, I think it's a good way to do things. I actually think they should start building geared to income housing that way. I think they should be going to hotel owners and other people that insist that they have to pay minimum wage, and say, if you have to pay minimum wage, these people need a place to live. And then maybe they would be able to help with the housing projects too. I think it's a must.
That's an interesting concept as well. And especially when you consider that places like, there's that you could build on that Niagara 77 site, probably easily 300 low-cost homes there.
Yes.
And have the hotels chip in and build that stuff.
I think hotels, I think Walmart, companies that insist they have to pay minimum wage, well, okay, then they need help with housing right now. And we need to, and I believe they should build it downtown too, Peter.
Yeah. And here's a prospect about that one. Wonder how many people think about that. If you pay minimum wage, you have to pay $5 on top for a housing supplement.
I think it's a great idea, because it's needed right now. We're in a state of emergency.
So it does, and it does mean that housing supplement would go to the federal or provincial government, but it would then work its way back to the municipalities.
Yeah, and if you built it downtown, then the people could walk to work and save money, and maybe buy a house one day.
Yeah, it would have to be for building houses within the within the bus and bus and walk catchment area of that workplace.
So I believe that the federal government's trying to push them in that direction with their funding for building houses quicker and all that, right? Because they've denied municipalities that don't have an idea to keep it along the infrastructure plan and along transit lines, right? So I think they're kind of trying to push that way, but they're not really loud about it like I would be. If you got a grand scheme like that, I think it's time to put the foot on the gas and get everything going and get everybody on the same page.
Okay, and I accept that what you're saying, because I'll tell you one thing, that everything and I've done only minimal amount of looking at this federal housing plan, and I have to say that it sucks as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's rolled out without giving out any information, and it's
Yeah,
too secretive.
yeah.
If you got a plan that's supposed to be for the future, you want the provinces, municipalities, and regions to be on the same page.
Well, you want them
You
to buy
gotta you
in,
gotta
don't you?
tell them what it is about, right?
Yeah, you want them to buy in. And actually, what I was saying about this making money available to, making that money available to local municipalities in order to build those low cost homes. We actually have already in both Niagara Falls and in the region here. We actually do already have many geared to income homes, but the challenge with geared to income homes is that they're they're run by an organization that seems to have a policy of, any troubled tenant they do nothing about except for kick them out.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems going on at the new apartment they built up the street for geared to income people, because you have so many different types of people living under one roof.
Well,
You
part
have
of
a person that's addicted living beside somebody that's not, and the problems that occur are huge, right?
well part of the problem with that system is you have one choice. Right, you've
Yeah,
got one option to turn down. So essentially, if you're going looking for rental housing, let's say that you can afford the rental housing at the current prices. Let's not get into a price question, right? But you go along to house A, and you go, I love the street, love the neighborhood, love the house, but bloody hell, the neighbors stink. Right, you go along to house 2, and you go, oh, this is a disgusting house, no way I'm going to live here. Right, no consideration for anything else. You go to house 3 and go, well, this is a much poorer house than house 1, but the neighbors come shook my hand, they're nice and friendly, I feel I could fit in here. You've got choices to make, haven't you?
and tough ones to make. I
you know
mean, affordability is the number one reason for people breaking up, right? Financial issues.
Probably.
Um, and right now, the way it is, financial issues is pretty well with everybody. I don't know anybody that's not being affected by the way this world is running right now.
No, I
Um,
agree with you. I
the
agree with you.
the cost is overwhelming, and
And
everybody
it
on a
doesn't.
fixed income is in trouble.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Yeah, people in fixed incomes, people like pensioners and that sort of thing, they're in trouble. People who are on minimum wage, they're in desperate trouble. And I'd even go to say, as far as to say that inflation has hurt those people, even on fantastic salaries.
Yeah, the working class are becoming the working poor,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's a scary situation going paycheck to paycheck.
And okay, going back to the region again, one of the things that we were talking about in terms of housing, we were talking about yesterday, was actually inclusion of services for those with disabilities, right?
Yeah, they say
And
you measure a community by how they treat their disabled. Our community's starting to really falter on that part.
well, and the part of the problem lies is that I suspect that they do a heck of a lot better in Toronto and Hamilton, because they have more frequent bus services, for one. and
Yes,
they have and
so
they
many
have bus
different
services.
transit choices,
Yeah,
um, that you don't have to travel far to get to where you need to go. Um, in Niagara Falls, however, it's even hard to get to the bus stop sometimes, depending on the
well,
weather.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah. If you were only able to walk, if I were only able to walk for half a mile, it would probably take me half an hour to get to the bus stop,
especially on a winter day.
Yeah, especially on a winter day, and I'd probably have to stop twice to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
these are things that are overlooked. Transit for disabilities is a difficult thing to look at, especially if you're not disabled. I find a problem with a lot of people on committees. God bless them for volunteering to be on the disability committee, but if you're not disabled, some of the things are overlooked, right?
Well, it's like the classic. It's like the classic going into the bathroom, and you're on the wheelchair, and of course the tubs are up here, and you're washing your hands, and you can't see what you can't see, and worse is the water. If you're doing anything, moving your hands, the water's likely to drip on your on you, right?
Or grab bars in the wrong spots.
But all of that.
There's a lot of situations.
And hey, put me, an able-bodied person, in a wheelchair and wheel me around into those places. I'm not going to look at it the same way as a guy in a wheelchair.
No, because you still have the option to move.
Yeah, because I've got that ability to just stand up and do it the normal way. Right?
Yes. Yeah. We can't pretend to know.
We can't.
You can't pretend to know anything about a disabled person unless you have that disability yourself. There's so many things that are overlooked. And of course, since I got injured, that's what's helped me to understand that.
Yeah, but again, even so, I get that you understand that a lot better than many people, but likewise, you are not wheelchair bound, for example.
Correct.
You wouldn't understand what it was like for a person with a wheelchair. So if you'd be more likely to build that sink an inch or two too high, which might be a total inconvenience for a wheelchair user.
Yes, and it's a simple thing to overlook, but what an aggravating thing for the person in the wheelchair.
Yeah, absolutely. And unless you experience that, unless you put in people with that problem, how do you know? And the same with buses and that sort of thing, because hey, I don't know that I'd like to get on a wheelchair. I don't know that I'd like to get from my house to Bridge Street on the to get on a bus in Bridge Street, let alone whether the bus is going to be able to lower to let me on. And most Niagara buses do lower,
Yes, they do. It's a good system for that. But like I said, in the winter, sometimes the elements on the bus stops, piles of snow and stuff, are in the way. Yep. And it's almost virtually impossible for a person with a disability to get on the bus sometimes.
Yeah, and actually, day two, the bus stops right where there's a bank of snow.
Yes.
And able-bodied people squeeze around the snow bank, but the guy in the wheelchair is looking at the snow and going, yeah, thank you very much.
It's a very difficult situation.
Yeah. And of course, that guy in the wheelchair, additionally, an able-bodied person, if the snow's in the way, can at least kick it out the way. Right? The person in the wheelchair most likely can't.
Yes. So
and that's a big problem.
So they talk about sustainable modes of transportation and getting off of diesel. So they're starting to invest in buses for the future and stuff. But it's such a slow process. By the time they get rid of diesel and get into electrical, it's probably going to be 30 years from now.
Yeah, and when you think about it, the change in cars from diesel to electric is probably going to be a heck of a lot faster. It's not going to be overnight by any means. And the government is spending $14.9 billion over the next 8 years in reliable, fast, affordable, clean public transit. Right? 14.9 billion over 8 years doesn't sound that much.
No, and I think it's a little late. they've given us this gas tax and raised the gas tax again and raise it again, and look how long it's taken them to come up with alternatives.
Yeah.
You should have the alternatives in place first before you start taxing people.
Yeah, you and I both agree upon that, because that is, in fact, that's what I've been saying for, pretty well all my life. When they've been talking in England about the need for us to get off of cars, I say, fine, provide me the affordable transit alternatives first. Right? First.
Yes.
Right. Because then you've got to sell me on those affordable, for example. So if I'm living in London and I want to go to Manchester, part of selling me the affordable transit is not that it's got to be considering that, okay, if I get out of my front door and I go and sit in my car and I drive to Manchester, it's likely 2 tanks of gas, 1 tank up there and 1 tank back, right? Plus the parking costs, etc., etc. So therefore, the cost of transit between my return trip to Manchester should cost me less than 2 tanks of gas. Even, and I'll go further, if I am taking my family of 4 to Manchester, it should cost me less than 2 tanks of gas.
And time. Don't forget, time is money too, right?
Well, the time aspect, yeah. But you see, somewhere like that, and the example I've just used, the London to whatever, I'm probably going to be an hour to get into Euston in central London, get on the train, and there's a train within an hour that's going to take me to Manchester, and it's going to get me up to Manchester in 2.5 hours. So I'm probably going to get there about an hour slower than if I drove.
Serious issue.
Well, yes and no. That might be in the acceptable range.
Yeah, but you always try and dispel people's arguments before you implement something, right? I always got to play devil's advocate, and time is an issue, right?
Yeah.
Time is an issue.
Yeah.
Some of the
especially since I could get on the highway, stick my foot down, and be doing 130 on the road, at times.
110 legally in Canada now.
Yeah, I know, but we know everybody breaks that, and
it just went up today. Is it today? It goes up to 110 on the highways.
You might be right.
Yeah, I think it's today or very soon. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't stop the Americans driving in the fast lane at 55. God, that annoys me. We're talking public transit here. Okay. Yeah. So so that government view, I think it's like too little. It's 14.9 billion spread over 8 years. Well, if they turned around the carbon tax into this transit policy, that would be that would be a lot more than that per year, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's you got to do the money shuffle thing to find it, right? They always do. And money is available through things like that, but then the people won't get their money back. So it would be a scary thing, right?
Well, and part of this actually is that the Fed money needs to go right back, to a large extent. Well, it does need provincial support, but it also needs to go back to municipal governments as well. Because obviously, if what you're doing is trying to encourage the growth of railways, for example, in Canada, then there's development funds that are needed to build the provincial railways. There's also development funds that are needed to build the local railways. For example, as a part of a transit plan, wouldn't it be a good idea if there was like a Niagara-based hub, let's say St. Catharines for convenience sake, because it's the center, where there was trains running up from Port Colborne and Welland and from Port Erie, up to St. Catharines. There were trains from Niagara Falls to St. Catharines, from Niagara on the Lake to St. Catharines on the Lake.
Yeah,
grant that we do have an issue in there in the middle of it with the canal.
we got an issue in Niagara Falls where there's only 2 ways in by rail. So the rail aspect for Niagara is almost dead, because we tore up all the other railways that used to be in this city. There's only 2 ways in now, right?
Yeah.
And one of them is an industrial route more than anything. So to build housing along that route isn't going to work, right?
Yeah, both are really industrial routes when it comes to public, to train transit.
Yeah, because they've torn up all the rest of them, right? So they'd probably have to build a new rail line if they wanted to do this properly,
Well, there's no rail line, for example. There's no pre-existing rail line between Welland and St. Catharines, for example.
Right. When in the 1800s we used to have the electric trolley that ran from Niagara on the Lake to Fort Erie, eh?
Yeah.
Way ahead of their time.
Yeah. And hey, why can't we bring those sort of things back?
Yeah, we still have the water to draw electricity from to run the line like they used to. I don't know why they don't do it, because it was a marvelous system.
Yeah. And okay, so what they're talking about, they've got, so this Canada's public transit future, and you can look this up on the government website. Rural Transit Solutions Fund, $250 million.
It's money that's needed, but again, how do municipalities access it? How does the province access it?
It's $250 million. If you're going to build another railway in Northern Ontario from Kenora to somewhere else, for example, hey, it's probably going to cost you $250 million to build that one railway, let alone any other railway.
Yeah, way more than that, actually.
Yeah, likely. And again, I do actually, right back to where we were at the beginning when we're talking about London. What about public-private partnerships on this? Because public corporations know that if we get better transit, that they've got better options for their workers.
I really think they should be pushing the private sector to help on issues like this and prove to them that it would help with getting their people to work. I know right now with interviews at work, one of the first things now they ask is, do you have a license? And it's not because you need a license for the job. They're just worried about you making it to work.
Well, but that is also discriminatory.
Yes, but they have a fear of people making it to work, and I don't know why, because in all reality, if you hire me, that's my business how I get to work. Just as long as I make it to work, it shouldn't matter.
Exactly.
They are posing the questions at interviews now.
Yeah, and exactly. So you know more or less where I live, but say okay. So Mike, this job is in downtown Niagara Falls. Are you able to get here? Are you able to get here by 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning? That's the scope of the questioning that should be good enough, right?
That should be good enough. That should be all they ask. Are you capable of making it to work?
Yeah,
that's it.
Exactly. It's more than making it to work. I don't care if it takes you 3 hours to get home. It's not the employer's problem, is it?
Well, now in the interviews, the sneaky question is, do you have a driver's license? And that's really none of their business.
Yeah. And that's actually, you see, Angela was talking about the loss of her driving license. She lost it about 30 years ago. She didn't even know she'd lost it. She went in for a medical procedure. And as part of that medical procedure, the doctors took her driving license away. It was a temporary situation. Had they just told her, hey, for the next 6 months, we suggest you don't drive, that would have been good enough, right? For them to say, hey, Well, in fact, they didn't even tell her. They just took the driving license away. That's wrong.
Yeah, it's pretty harsh. They do a science thing there, and they don't look at what they're personally doing to the person, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen it happen before too, where people have gone for a medical and then their driver's license is pulled without them even knowing it. And it's a harsh reality, and it's a kick in the face to the people that have to deal with that.
Yeah, and the thing is, and what you've got is your medical situation is a temporary thing, but it doesn't stop you getting to work in Hamilton every day. It
Yeah.
just slows you down a bit, right?
Well, I have seen a lot of people with a heart attack, for instance, or a stroke, and then they have a slow response neurologically from their eyesight to their brain, and they lose their license for that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so actually, we were talking about this federal funding, Canada's public transit future, federal funding for transit. One of the things I notice here, they've got in here, okay, we just talked about Rural Transit Solutions Fund for rural communities, $250 million. The next one on the list is Zero Emission Transit Fund, $2.75 billion. There's a disconnect there.
Yeah, that's a big, huge difference in money, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be going for zero emission, but sure. So actually, the clever guy in the rural transit who wants the rural transit says, okay, I've got rural transit issue. I want 10 million bucks for my rural transit, but I want it zero emission. So I want 500 million bucks for the zero emission.
Yeah, they do kind of cross each other here and there. So
Yeah.
some of that money should be shared, I would think, right? Like,
Oh yeah, but you probably what you have to do as the transit manager for each of those areas, you have to kind of pick and choose the funds that you're applying for, don't you?
yeah, and here's another thing. I've never read anything about a bullet train from east to west in Canada, which I think we need.
Well, 100%. I think that yeah, a bullet train. Okay. In order to develop a bullet train is 10 years of infrastructure development.
Yes.
Right. Talk to any conductor or engineer on a train, and they'll tell you the one thing you have to do if you're going to do bullet type trains is you have to get the train has to be an isolated line for the bullet train. Yes, every once in a while, of course, there are intersections that cross it, so goods trains cross that track. But we need to actually, when you think about Europe, we have probably 3 times as many goods trains, but no goods train is like 3 kilometers long.
Right.
Goods trains are about 30 cars long, not 3 kilometers.
Yeah.
Right? About the same, and in fact, so that basically means that you can run goods trains along lines that are parallel to the fast lines. But for example, if you look at the average speed of trains in Europe, the average speed in most of Europe, in Germany, it's about 160 kilometers an hour. In Britain, it's about 135. In France, it's about 135. In Spain, it's about nearing 200. But in America, it's like 55. In Canada, it's like about 80.
So I would say that we are far behind on the technology, aren't we?
Yeah,
Have a good day,
exactly.
babe.
We are. And
why is North America so far behind on that technology?
And again, if you overlap the European, if you compare the European, if you look at the Europe versus America, and given that in Europe, Britain had the largest number, by the end of the Second World War, Britain had the largest numbers of miles of railway of any country in the world, right? Well, actually, not in the world. One of the largest numbers of certainly Europe of mileage of railway, but part of the plan by, I think the name of the politician was Rubens. He tore up a lot of the local tracks in Europe. So by the 1945 rail map versus the 1980 rail map, significantly smaller in Britain. But if you look, generally speaking, if you look at the rail map of Europe versus the rail map of North America, the numbers of, it's staggeringly different.
Yeah, and I think India relies on railway for everything, right?
Well, India actually has high-speed trains now. They're
Right.
competing against, you see, what you have in India is, you only, if you're going to talk about highways of quality of the QEW or Britain's M1, you have one, grand total of one, right? That is it. The Mumbai to Delhi highway, it's not yet complete, right? It is incomplete. It is, and so essentially wealthy people, or wealthier people who've got money, go by train or by air.
Right.
That's the way that they do it, right? Either train or air. And the train options have improved dramatically. Those trains are people hanging onto the doors. Those are only local trains. The long distance trains are express now.
Right.
And they're fast, and they're getting they're more than 100 kilometers an hour, and they have dedicated track.
So I feel it's an option that we're missing out on because our infrastructure isn't set up for it.
Yeah, and it would be a massive amount, it would be a massive project to do that, because essentially we have, not that many people use it, but we do have the Highway 1 that goes from coast to coast, right?
Yeah.
Trans-Canada Highway 1, which is actually not called Highway 1 in most parts of the country.
Yeah, but we need a rail line that would go east to west, and I think bullet train, because you need the speed, the amount of distance you're traveling, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you think about the bullet trains in Japan are managing to go from Tokyo to pretty well even the most extreme reaches of Japan in basically an hour and a half.
Yeah, I think our people need to talk to them and learn from them and start implementing this system, because, like you and I have said, without alternatives, you shouldn't have the right to start charging people. You got to
No.
have the alternatives first.
Yeah, you've got to have the alternatives before you can put carbon tax on.
Yeah, I've disagreed with that whole idea because they aren't ready for it yet.
Yeah,
they haven't.
And I've been saying, and the thing is, that is something I've been saying in Europe, in relation to Britain, for 50 years, and we have a heck of a lot more transit options in Britain than we do here. And
Right.
and as I said, you've got to convince me that if I want to go to Montreal, I'm a person in Niagara Falls. I want to go to Montreal for my holiday for a week, and I've got my 4 children to me, my wife, my 2 kids to go with me. So there's 4 people to go with me, right? It's got to cost me, first of all, it's got to cost me less than what it cost me to go by car there and back.
Yes.
Right. And it's got to be as fast. So, we got to get there in, it's going to take me 6 hours to drive there, maybe 7 if I'm stopping on the highway for an hour somewhere down there. But I've got to be there in 6 or 7 hours, right? And it's bullet trains that take that load. And the interesting thing is that most of those bullet trains are not high on exhaust either, are they?
No, not at all. No. And they need direct energy, which is what you could use for solar and wind, right?
Yeah. And Okay, so the federal government's plan really, really is lackluster, I have to say. So let's then look at what. Okay, so for Ontario, is there a plan for Ontario? And so I went to look that up. I sent you that this morning because I
Yes.
didn't see it until this morning. A transportation plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe.
Yeah.
And the minister's message, this is Carolyn Mulroney, who's a minister of transportation. We're building new highways like the 413, Bradford Bypass, where with over 100 near-term actions, rapidly growing region, we're laying the foundation for improved people's access to jobs, housing, healthcare, education, family and friends, etc., right? Where's the public transit in here?
I don't see much at all.
Yeah.
I don't see.
I'm not opposed to building roads, but I think we need we need a plan for two things. We need roads because we're always going to have trucks, so we're going to need to move stuff. We're not going to always move things on the railroads.
Right.
We need trucks to move things. We need convenient ways to be able to move around our systems, but we need to be less dependent upon roads than we are today. I'm not sure we need to build more roads. One or two instances we may, but generally speaking, we should be trying to relieve the congestion. The 401 congestion isn't going to be built by making the 401 3 times as wide.
Yeah, you need different routes. You need we can't follow the same routes, right? That's the problem. Some of the routes make you go around something, and they want the routes to go straighter, right?
Yeah.
Old style highways that are still in use, and trying to build a new one is a tough thing to do today, right? Having to go through new wetlands or the last few wetlands that are left and stuff to try and build a new highway is a really difficult thing.
Well, and here's the thing. So back to my family holiday in Montreal. The one good thing about the train is that hey kids, we're in this carriage here. Run around the train all you want. I'm sitting here reading my book for the next 3 hours.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, hey, there is a snack bar. There is a snack bar in Coach 14. Is anybody want lunch? I'm heading there.
It's it would be nice to have that option, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we don't have any kind of transit systems that will replace your car right now. We don't have one in this country. We don't have any transit system that's reliable for people with disabilities because it's not set up for speed. It's set up once every hour. So we need huge improvements in transit, especially when they keep saying that we got to move away from cars. We got to move away from gas cars. Then you got to improve things, and that isn't happening. All these things are. Look at the Ford government's making a plan for the next 10 years when he's only in power for 4 years. I know we got to make plans for the future, but we got a problem in our system where if this government comes up with a plan for the next 10 years and then in 4 years somebody else gets elected and squashes it, then we're back to square one again,
Yeah, but but hey, we do have to make, that's part and parcel of having a democracy. It is rare historically. It does happen. I do agree that hey, the Liberals are in power in the federal government, and when the Conservatives come along, they go, yep, we didn't like that. We don't like that act, and we don't like that act, and they kick them out. They may have stated that they don't like hundreds of acts that the federals put in, but generally what happens is they amend them rather than cut them.
Right.
Because somebody somebody kind of staff member says, well, if you cut this bill, this and this and this will happen, and it will now cost you X billion dollars. And the person goes, oh, didn't realize that. Oh, thank you for that. Okay. Well, what can we do to amend it to make it more conservative friendly, let's say, since we were talking about replacing a federal, a liberal government with a conservative government, right?
Yes.
And that's typically what happens with a lot of bills. So they get amended, and actually sometimes people breathe a sigh of relief that a bill has gotten amended, because they're just kind of the many people are kind of looking at the bill thinking, if this goes to the Supreme Court, it's going to get blown away. It's going to get, taken apart by the judges. And when the amendment comes in, they stop biting their nails.
Well, when I'm reading the provincial article here, they're talking about transit communities. But when I look at the new neighborhoods, being built in Niagara Falls, I'm not seeing the transit community that much.
Yeah, this is this article that's written by University of Toronto professors Maddie Samitiaki and Drew Fagan. Samitiaki. I don't know. I probably mispronounced that name either way. And basically what they're talking about is that we need to have exactly what you're saying, is transit oriented communities that basically look at where people need to go to and from for their work, for their shopping, for their leisure, etc., and take care of that in relation to the transit needs.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it in these new communities being built in Niagara. Some of them are way out in Timbuktu, and you're going to have to add transit to it.
Yeah, and there's no buses there. Well, that one that was at this that was near SciTech that you and I were at the council on, that we didn't think was a very good idea. You're talking about this is way out in the sticks there at the end, almost at the end of McLeod Road, and you're building a a low cost housing project that's a million miles away from where everybody's working, and there's no transit between there and where they work.
Yeah, it's so I'm not seeing the ideas from the federal government, the provincial government, and then down to the municipalities matching.
Yeah,
it's a huge problem.
Yeah, and that is because the thing is that, for a start, a community like that doesn't get built on the far reaches of McLeod Road. It gets built just outside the tourist core where people can walk to work.
That's where I think they should be moving their direction. They have to start rethinking the way they're doing things. And I'm still not seeing. I'm seeing more detached homes than anything, and not very many things being built geared to income.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to build, you see, for example, for geared to income type housing, or for low cost housing, they need to be generally apartment buildings, right?
Yes, 100%.
A mix in an apartment building, you need a mix of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units, right? Yeah. Typically in apartment buildings, you don't build 4 bedroom units, but you need the mix. So you need basically, you need enough of each of them in order to attract the right people in as tenants in that. But if they're stipulated, part of the problem that we have with much of our stipulation about low cost housing, affordable housing, is essentially all that happens is the person signs up a thing that for the next 5 years that housing is going to be affordable. Then, of course,
after that, they have the option to opt out, right?
Well, yeah, and then of course what will happen is, so here, Mike, you're your 2-bedroom home at $1,200 a month. That's great. That's affordable. Here's your contract. And we hope you stay and enjoy this place. Says the greedy landlord as he goes, okay, so he's moving in there in 2025. That makes it 2030 when my 5-year agreement is up. So in 2031, what you get on your doormat is like, hey, Mike, we'd love to have you as a tenant, a continuing tenant. You have been the most wonderful tenant in the building, but we're doubling your rent.
And that's the option, and that's the way they're getting developers to invest now.
Well, developers, anything developed after 2018 can be done that way.
Yeah, so now they have the option to opt out after a certain amount of time, which, in my opinion, is wrong. That's a wrong-headed idea, and greed is going to supersede everything every time.
And again, what's missing in some of these is actually, okay, probably not for much of the developments on McLeod Road, although I have to wonder, is the buses going up and down McLeod Road?
Do you know what McLeod Road is an example of what this city's going to be like soon in the gridlock?
Yeah.
To drive from one side of McLeod Road to the other take you 20 minutes now.
Yeah.
This whole city's going to be that way soon.
I was talking to Adam Hyde a few months ago when Dave was last off. One of the things we were talking about was traffic lights there. He says he's got about, I think he said 12 sets of traffic lights between, he goes onto McLeod Road from the Kayla area, and it comes off at Drummond,
right.
where his office is. And essentially, a lot of, on an average morning, some mornings he'll go straight through green, 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 green. And other mornings it will be green, green, red, green, green, red, green, green, red. Right? And other mornings it will be red, 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 red. Right? And the point being is you can't plan your day on that. And part of the challenge there is that I used to live in a city, I used to work in a city in Slough back in the 80s. And they had this transit system whereby if you were going down the particular road, it would go green, 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 green. It would change to green as you're going along, providing you were going the speed limit.
Correct.
So cruise along at 30 miles an hour and it would green, 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 and you cruise in. Very rarely would you stop, right? And the point about that particular thing is I had to get to the highway to do it, but I'd go one junction further on the highway because it would be quicker to get to work because of the way that road would flow into the workplace than in the morning than it would be to get off the junction earlier and go the other way because because the place I was working at was halfway down that road. So if I went the junction further round and came back, I'd go green, 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 turn. When I'm going, if I were going, the normal, the shorter route, it would be red, 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 turn. Whereas I come back,
20 minutes out of your day.
Yeah. So it was 2 minutes longer drive to go around, but it was shorter coming down the local road going around. Right. So it took me 5 minutes less to do that. And driving back, I'd do I'd drive the irony is you drive back the other way as well, because it would save you hassle as well.
Right.
So
and looking at all these plans, I'm not seeing anybody match up with ideas.
Yeah.
From the municipal to the provincial to the federal, they have ideas, but they don't seem to match.
Yeah. Right. So what would you say your idea of transit-oriented communities is?
A transit-oriented community, in my idea, means that it's accessible for everybody. And I don't see that in, like, for instance, a neighborhood without sidewalks.
Yeah.
How could it be transit oriented?
Yeah. Well, it's car oriented and that's it, right?
Yes. So transit oriented is a failure if you don't have sidewalks at all. You've already failed on that idea.
Even on a cul-de-sac like mine?
I No, as long as that transit is close enough for
Because the
somebody to
transit's not
access
going
it,
to
right?
come down my cul-de-sac, right?
Right. So if the transit's close enough for you to access it, then it's okay, right? But if you're gonna have to walk, if it's gonna be a journey, then it's no good.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, one question in relation to that would be, is that one of ableism, right? All
Yeah,
right.
and if you have a pickup spot, that pickup spot should be thought of being a centralized
Well,
place so people can access it, right?
and I have to wonder whether this transit-oriented communities is some maps to somewhat on what people talk about as 15-minute cities.
Yeah, I'm thinking they're thinking there has to be a store in the community. Has to be certain
Well,
things in the community so you don't have to go across town. Like look at Chippewa. They don't even have a bank in their community anymore. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
so that's a harsh thing, right? Now you got to drive across town to get to a bank. You know.
Yeah, well, you see, if we went outside my childhood home, I turn right. If I turn right, there's a cafe 50 meters away, and about another 30 meters on the other side of the road, there's a convenience store. If I turn left, and I go across the main road, there's 100 meters from there, there's a convenience store, a newsagent's, a dairy, a bakery, another bakery further down. And if I were to go up to the main road and turn left, there was a newsagent's, a chip shop, and a few things like that, all within like less than half, all within a few hundred meters of my house, right? That doesn't exist in a lot of our modern communities here in Canada.
No, but if there's talking about it, when you're going to implement it?
Yeah.
The province has that idea, and then the city has that idea. What if the federal government is not on the same page? What then?
Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to have to kind of call that quits.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've got to go to a hearing. All right.
I have an appointment myself.
Yeah. So have a great day, everybody, and if you're gonna be using public transit for the next little while, be patient.
Have a good day, Niagara.
Bye.